Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast. No, it's not Stay Green. No, it's not Cardboard Chat. It's the OG talking the National Football League off-season edition. I am your host, Todd Furman, joined, I would say as always, but it's infrequent during the off-season, but the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, we had the luxury of spending some quality time together in person, but it's the first time since the Super Bowl, essentially, we're back on the mic together.
Well, the first thing is there is no offseason.
It's a good point.
Right. That's really where this is heading these days. March 30th, I believe, was the last time we convened for the Final Four. And then, yes, you decided to do something absolutely crazy and get hitched. So I saw you pretty recently. Fine event you put together there.
Hey, you know, every now and again, you have to go outside the comfort zone. You have to make sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and you do things the right way. But I was most impressed, you know, before we get into the football brass tacks, is that you're quickly becoming a playoff hockey veteran. You're seeing games on the West Coast. You're going to games in your backyard. And lo and behold, we're one step closer to your Florida Panthers going one step further than the Golden Knights out here.
Well, not too fast. Let's kind of pull that back a little bit. I've kind of been pounding the table for years that hockey's the best sport to attend live. Right? Football is just unbearable. I get the college vibe. That's fun when we went to the Tennessee-Bama game for your bachelor party, but they're all-day events. Yeah. For the NFL, that's impossible for me. I got too much going on, too many games to watch, too much stuff, I'm dealing with on a game day. I can't, tailgate at 9 a.m. and then tailgate after the game because you're going to be in the parking lot anyways. The only NFL games I'll ever attend is like a Thursday night standalone or a Monday night standalone. Hockey is perfect, right? Like you're in and out in 2.5 hours. It's cool in there. Best sport to watch live, not even close. So yes, you nicely took me to was it game one of the
game
Oilers?
One of Oilers Knights, and have to turn around with another member of the Bet the Board family for game 5 of Oilers Knights.
I'm glad you pried him out of the cave. This is difficult stuff. I don't think a lot of people understand this, but it's like difficult to get out of the cave when you're a professional sports bettor. So I'm glad you got him out. I've given him all the do's and don'ts on things not to say to you.
Here we go.
Given him a heads up of the line of questioning he'll probably receive from Todd Furman. So I've put all of the things in place so you don't scare Brad away for the upcoming college football season.
Last thing we want to do is have to recruit our 5-star blue chipper that we brought in last year and have to try and make sure he doesn't enter the transfer portal before the upcoming college football season. So I appreciate all that, and maybe I need the cliff notes as well to make sure that I do my part, do my appropriate part as a member of the Bet the Board family. But all right, we got a big show on tap for folks. We're going to cover a lot of the NFL offseason storylines, the things that grabbed headlines leading up to free agency and throughout that process. Obviously, as we sit here and record on Friday, May 12th, we had the schedule release on May 11th, and then naturally had a little bit of a draft recap. So we'll try and run the 2-minute drill of sorts, hit on a lot of these topics, maybe not in the same level of depth that people have grown accustomed to during the regular season, but a lot of territory to get to. And I think, Payne, the most logical place for us...
Well, let me bust your balls here already. We've been here how long? We've been doing these off-season reports that basically talk about NFL free agency trades, a little bit of a draft recap, some schedule release. We've been doing this for like 4 or 5 years now. So this isn't new.
Yeah, no, but every now and again we get new listeners that come into the family. We tweak the format a little bit, and I have to reintroduce some of the topics that we're going to lay out for all of them.
Football season's officially here. I don't know if anyone knows this yet, but we've enhanced the football offering. We're going to do some G5 previews, and when I say we, I don't mean me. I mean you and Brad.
I like how you conveniently leave that out. Your college football season doesn't start until it normally does, maybe a little bit earlier because of my summer travel plans.
Power 5.
I'm glad you go, hey, look, I'm going to give you a
football
layout for what the summer schedule is going to look like for podcasts, and I get it. It's Todd and Brad. I'm going, I think there's
for the G5
I think there's
stuff.
a name missing from some of this G5 stuff.
Yeah, that's not my cup of tea. Obviously, we'll do some work there, but I'm not wasting my time talking about it. That's for sure. I'll let the football guys who claim that they are hardcore football guys who base their entire fall existence on Saturdays discuss some of those things. Just a grazing of sorts. It won't be a massive deep dive. I'll help you guys in terms of what should be discussed there. But I trust you.
I'll wait for this.
To carry the torch.
I'll wait for the syllabus like I used to get in college from my professor, so I knew exactly where
big school
the curriculum was going to take me. All right, speaking of the NFL and offseason storylines, the big one finally got settled a few weeks ago. That was, of course, Lamar Jackson re-signing a massive deal with the Baltimore Ravens to be their quarterback for the future. The big thing when you look at Lamar and his 5-year extension, which was the richest in NFL history, he's the only player in NFL history to produce 25 touchdown passes and 1,000 yards rushing in a season. He's done that twice. We've obviously seen some levels of uneven play. Durability has been a concern over the last couple of years. But that's not the only thing going on in Baltimore. You bring in a new offensive coordinator. Todd Monken comes over from Georgia with plans to change the offense. New playbook, new terminology as he takes over for Greg Roman. Lamar Jackson not at optional OTAs. They go out and they try and bolster the receiving core. Odell Beckham Jr. through free agency, Zay Flowers through the draft, and hoping for a healthy return of Rashad Bateman. When you look at everything transpiring specifically on the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens, we know Lamar Jackson's not going to throw for 6,000 yards, despite him telling us that. What are you looking at from a new-look Ravens attack?
The whole situation was interesting how that played off. I mean, it was looking like those two were going to sever ties the way that ultimately played out. And I think, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens didn't actually get a deal done. It was the Philadelphia Eagles that got that Lamar Jackson Baltimore Ravens deal done. That was basically how that unfolded for everyone unfamiliar with what went on behind the scenes. Once Jalen Hurts inked the 5-year deal for $179 guaranteed, that became the needed data point, so to speak, for Lamar's side to finally realize that an anomaly isn't a market, right? The anomaly was the desperate Cleveland Browns organization who's made the playoffs like twice since 1995, giving Deshaun Watson $230 million guaranteed over 5 years. So once that data point on Jalen Hurts came in, it really helped get this deal with Lamar and Baltimore over the line. I think, just kind of hearing your tone there, you're not still in love with these options for Lamar Jackson. I tend to disagree.
I'm skeptical because he's always thrived with bigger receivers. Now, look, the proof is going to be in the pudding. We know Mark Andrews is back, and maybe these guys, if they all stay healthy out there, can give him some of the weapons on the outside they haven't had. But go ahead.
I just, huge upgrade in offensive coordinators with Todd Monken.
There.
And so, yes, he's going to be learning a new system, but think about what Todd Monken was able to do at Georgia. If you actually think about how Georgia's offense operated, it was very multidimensional. 1 week, we're going to run it right up your ass and play power football, something Baltimore likes to do. The next week, you think we're going to run the ball, and we're going to come out, we're going to have Stetson Bennett chuck it all over the park. And then you see the national championship game, and it's like, shit, we got some read option in here. This is going to fit perfectly with Lamar Jackson. So I think Todd Monken has the ability to be adaptable. It's going to be, air quotes, his system, but it's going to be catered to Lamar Jackson's skill set. The weapons around Lamar are the best ever. Like Mark Andrews, a top 3 tight end. Rashad Bateman only played 6 games last year, but he flashed in those 6 games, nearly 2.4 yards per route run. That was more than a guy like CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, he overpaid for OBJ. That was a little bit of a repairing of the Lamar-Baltimore relationship. It's also not a deal that hurts you long-term. It's a 1-year deal. OBJ still needs to go out and prove it. If you think about him as a receiver, 19 months removed from the knee injury. Last time we saw OBJ, he was on a heater for the Rams. It was like 7 touchdowns in 11 games, 288 yards in 3.5 playoff games. He was the best player in the first half of the Super Bowl before he went down. And then you go out and get Zay Flowers at pick 22. You have cheap depth in Nelson Aguilar. Zay Flowers is interesting because obviously he's undersized a little bit, but if he came out a year earlier, I think the vibe would be a little bit different on Zay Flowers. The guy didn't have an offensive line. If you watched the film, he was constantly open. By the time he'd look around to see if the ball was coming, his quarterback was planted in the ground. So I think he provides some great route running, a little bit of a deeper threat. 4 of 5 starting offensive linemen return. But I think the overarching point here is like there's no more excuses for Lamar Jackson, right? He can't play another 12-game season for the 3rd straight year, which is something you mentioned at the top with his durability. Can't underachieve in the playoffs again. Lamar got his deal. My understanding, he's very happy. He's in a great mental space. Upgraded the coordinator, upgraded the weapons. Now it's Super Bowl or bust.
And look, I mean, if Baltimore's going to have success, it's going to have to be on the offensive side. I mean, we'll do a deep dive as we always do leading up to the season in August, but this is a far cry from what we've grown accustomed to defensively for the Ravens. So they may need to outscore some of their problems, and that's obviously why you make this kind of long-term commitment to a guy that you think can finally get you to the top of the mountain in Lamar Jackson. But Payne, he wasn't the only quarterback that was unhappy with his situation. He obviously returned to Baltimore on a longer deal, but another prominent name who will inevitably be a first ballot Hall of Famer when he hangs it up changed his shade of green, moving from Lambeau Field in the frozen tundra of Wisconsin to MetLife Stadium, becoming a member of the Jets. Aaron Rodgers changed his number from 12 to 8, going back to his college days at Cal, and it was a deal where it was Rodgers and the 2023 first-round pick for the Green Bay Packers, number 15 overall, ends up going to the Jets for a 2023 fifth-round pick, the 13th pick, a second-round pick, that turned into Luke Musgrave, a 2023 sixth-round pick, and a variety of other pieces. Is Aaron Rodgers the missing link in New York, knowing how piss-poor their quarterback play was on a week-in, week-out basis a season ago?
I think the way you phrased the latter part of that question is the one that that makes the most sense, right? This seems to be polarizing. Even Jets fans during that process of, we think he's going to be our quarterback, we're not quite sure. A lot of Jets fans are like, we don't really want him. We don't really want him. I want to think about it this way. Like, in terms of true pass-first quarterbacks, you'd take Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Herbert. Maybe you could debate Trevor Lawrence over Aaron Rodgers for this season. And then you have Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, who you take over Aaron Rodgers, but aren't really scheme fits. Like, aside from that list of names, who else are you taking over Aaron Rodgers for the 2023
I mean, I didn't hear you mention Tua, Sam Darnold, or Jimmy Garoppolo, so I don't know what's going on here. This list feels like it's incomplete.
My point is, like, Rodgers is somewhere between QB5 and QB8. And I fully understand what comes with Aaron Rodgers and why there were naysayers, and you wonder if he plays in the current country's landscape with New York City media, and that'll be a second job for Aaron Rodgers handling that. But you just kind of look at what's going on here. He's got a better support system. The defensive side of the ball with the Jets is substantially better than what he had in Green Bay. Jets had the 5th best schedule-adjusted defense. He walks into an offensive scheme that he knows with Hackett, so the transition isn't going to be overly difficult. And I think that's huge, knowing, the Jets just have a gauntlet to start the season, toughest schedule the first
Brutal.
6 weeks. Is it 4 road games?
I mean, it feels like every game is under the bright lights, and every game is against the team that's expected to make the postseason.
Yeah, the reality is this. Like, if you're someone that says Aaron Rodgers is past his prime, he's a diva, New York media is going to crush him. You're probably right, but here's the truth, right? Like, Zach Wilson was 2.5 points worse than an average quarterback. Right now, we're starting our projection with this version of Aaron Rodgers, 3.5 points better than an average quarterback. It's a 6-point freaking upgrade, and that's just the starting point. There's a reason the Jets' win total is 4 games higher than last season. And we can debate whether it's inflated or not. That's probably a different day, different conversation. But it's clear, like, this version of Aaron Rodgers is a massive upgrade over Zach Wilson, and that's what matters in our world when we're actually assessing this team from, like a financial, fiscal perspective.
No, I mean, look, that's the bottom line. You're talking about going from A to B, and we know how good and talented and deep this Jets defense.
I would say it's like A to Z.
All right, well, we can definitely go A to Z.
I mean, Zach Wilson has been highly incompetent.
That surprised me a ton. I mean, I know the schedule that he faced at BYU is always going to come into question, but his inability to adapt and show any sign of maturation or progress there has been a little bit head-scratching for his 2 years in New York.
Said he's going to give Aaron Rodgers all he can handle in practice. If only he would have had that mentality 2-3 years ago.
Where is that right off the bat? I do have to ask you, though, about the flip side of the coin, albeit briefly, because it's not the biggest story here. Green Bay parting ways with Aaron Rodgers means that Jordan Love becomes their starting quarterback, now making Tom Clements, the quarterback coach who worked with Aaron Rodgers, basically one of the key figures for everything that Green Bay is going to accomplish this season. And it's all the talk about Jordan Love needed time to develop. We knew he was raw coming out of Utah State. We saw flashes in mop-up time against the Philadelphia Eagles. But when you look at Green Bay, it's obviously a drop-off there as well. But are there any realistic expectations for Jordan Love and what he could look like in his first season as a starting quarterback?
We know Jordan Love has all the tools. All we hear out of Green Bay is how awesome he looks, right? I mean, even in his first rookie camp, he can make all of the throws. Every single camp, we've heard nothing but Jordan Love praise. David Bakhtiari, who's seen a thing or two since the Packers are entering a rebuild. The market suggests something very similar to what David Bakhtiari is saying, right? The win total's at 7.5. And this was a team that would outperform its metrics annually. I know we would get crushed for it and keep telling all the loyal Green Bay fans that this wasn't a 13-win team the last 3 years, and we kind of see them bust out early, and we end up being proven true despite the regular season record. The defense was below average again last season, 20th in schedule adjusted efficiency, 22nd the season before, and now you're going to be asking them to do a little bit more, and you just wonder if they have that. I think that's reasonable to hope for. Aaron Rodgers isn't there to bail them out, and candidly, you just kind of look at the rest of this roster. The names are good, right? The Packers have 8 first-round picks on their defense. There's no excuse that they can't be better. If they live in that same defensive production window, right, below average in that 17 to 22 range, it's very clear there's some problems within the organization, right? That would be like a combination of poor drafting, poor development, poor coaching and scheme. You can't have 8 first-rounders on your defense and be that poor, especially this year when you're not going to be getting as much out of the quarterback position.
It's real interesting because Green Bay's schedule, at least on paper, up until their bye week that comes extremely early at week 6, they don't exactly play a murderer's row of defenses. So it can either go extremely well for Jordan Love if he hits the ground running, or it's going to raise a lot of red flags when you look at a team that goes at the Bears, at Atlanta, home against the Saints, home against the Lions, and at the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football, October 9th. So clearly going to be interesting.
Feels like we'll know pretty quickly,
There's
right?
no doubt about it. And if Love does perform, I mean, this guy could be an absolute steal from a fantasy standpoint because the schedule defensively doesn't get all that much more daunting as you get into the second half. But you know what? It could be feast or famine for a young quarterback who's expected to take on an awful lot. These guys aren't young quarterbacks, Payne. They're veterans. They have full bodies of work, and they've kind of swapped places to a certain extent. Derek Carr ends up leaving the silver and black out here in the desert. He'll take over under center for the New Orleans Saints. And into Las Vegas steps Jimmy Garoppolo with a high level of familiarity, given everything he knows about Josh McDaniels, and also now the minority owner, as we saw news break on Friday morning, that Tom Brady will still be Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Garoppolo's boss in an indirect capacity. When we look at Derek Carr, 63-79 record for the Raiders, despite 271 touchdown passes, a completion percentage of shade under 65, and 33 game-winning drives. It did mark the relative chaos that he had been thrust into, knowing that the Raiders' defense hadn't exactly been there. But he goes into a situation in New Orleans where the Saints bring in a familiar target in Foster Moreau. Michael Thomas, potential return. He's going to be a shell of himself at best. The Saints' offensive line expected to be healthier, dealing the rash of injuries a season ago. And quite frankly, for Carr, the best thing for him is that division is extremely unsettled, and you talk about a soft slate of opposing defenses, Derek Carr can check every single box down there in New Orleans.
For a quiet, laid-back guy, it feels like Derek Carr's pretty polarizing because the play is just consistently inconsistent, and you wonder if it's a byproduct of what's been around him, to your point. He's clearly not an elite quarterback, but maybe he has a little bit more consistency around him, a little bit more organizational support around him, new environment, added motivation. Hopefully that allows Derek Carr to play at his peak, and if so, sizable upgrade for the Saints. You just, at its very core, like this version of Derek Carr is better than Andy Dalton. But if you look metrically, those guys basically played at the same level last season. There wasn't like this material difference between the two. If you look at EPA plus completion percentage over expectation, Dalton was better than Carr. Just EPA, Carr was QB 15, slightly better than Dalton. So for me, when you kind of look at the landscape of the NFC, you look at the landscape of the South, Carr has to play somewhere between QB 8 and 12 levels. If he plays between QB 15 and QB 18, that difference is basically the size of the ocean. That difference is, New Orleans winning 8 games and underachieving, or winning 10 plus and being a solid playoff team in a poor division with a horrific conference and making a little bit of a noise. So this is very much on Derek Carr. The Saints have the very easiest schedule in the NFL. They have a very easy schedule to start the season, so you can build some momentum there with Derek Carr. And if they come out of the gate strong, this is a little bit of an interesting team in the NFC.
When you look at Derek Carr's former employer, the Las Vegas Raiders, they go and land Jimmy Garoppolo. Raiders appeared much closer last year after some of those blown leads in the season that could have been in Coach McDaniel's tenure. When you look at what Jimmy was able to accomplish during his time in San Francisco, appeared in 3 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. In 57 games with the Niners, Garoppolo had a passer rating a shade under 100. 13,599 yards passing, 82 touchdowns to 42 picks. But as the starter, and we talked about it at great lengths, he got the job done in terms of wins and losses, 38-17. I guess the question that I have to ask, Payne, and I know it's rather open-ended, is Jimmy Garoppolo an upgrade over Derek Carr on the surface, or can he be an upgrade because of his familiarity and what the Raiders want to do from an offensive concept standpoint?
I could go so many ways with that question, but, obviously reuniting with Josh McDaniels helps. And they were together, I believe it was 3 seasons from 2014 to 2016, and McDaniels was Jimmy G's offensive coordinator. He was his QB coach. The way Jimmy G played under McDaniels is what propelled him to that big contract in San Francisco. So on that level, it makes sense. You're also bringing him in to keep Devontae Adams somewhat happy, right? It makes sense. It does nothing else. It just feels like, this is a failure in communication to get everyone on the same page, owner, GM, head coach. It's fine last season. People in the Raiders building weren't smart enough to realize the playoff push in 2021 was fake, right? People in that building weren't smart enough to realize they were outscored by 65 points, that they trailed in 15 of 17 games at some point, that they were very lucky, top 8, I believe, in field goal and fumble luck, right? That they had won all 4 overtime games, that they had went 7-2 in 1-score games. So the Raiders went for it, right? You trade for Adams, you sign Chandler Jones, you re-up Derek Carr. It didn't work. It feels like it's just time to blow it all up. Reset, right? The free agent receiver class stunk. The receivers in the draft weren't great. Get rid of Adams now while he still has a few years of prime football left in him. Crosby has value. Just get everyone on the same page. Blow this thing up, start from scratch. They're effectively putting Band-Aids over potholes, and it's not going to fix this. Think about this for a second. We know the AFC is extremely strong, but focus on the West Division for a minute.
Good luck.
Here.
Good luck, Raiders.
Right? Who is Josh McDaniels clearly better than among AFC West coaches? Right? Who is the Raiders quarterback clearly better than in the AFC West? Which Raider unit, offense or defense, is clearly better than any of their division mates? And the answer is none, right? The Raiders are not clearly better in any of those categories than any of their division mates. Like, blow it up. Figure this out. Right? I just don't understand how this method or this plan of attack is going to have any long-term success. It just makes no sense. You brought in Josh McDaniels. It wasn't the guy I would have hired. I understand why you, air quotes, went for it last season. Now it's time to blow up. Let them kind of start this thing from scratch. This just feels very weird where they're at right now.
You never know. This could be the first step into the Caleb Williams / Drake May sweepstakes for next year, and we'll see if the Raiders would elect to draft a quarterback.
Well, that's my point. Blow it up, right? Like, Jimmy G ain't getting you the first pick. Like, he's better than that.
I'm with you, and when that was announced, I mean, I honestly thought, and we had talked about it late in the year, that, hey, look, if the Raiders want to figure it out and roll the dice, just go with Jarrett Stidham. If it works out, suddenly you found a diamond in the rough. He knows the system. And if it completely blows up in your face, going 3-14 ain't the worst case scenario.
Well, he had one bad sample size, so of course you couldn't start the season with him, and you had to make Devontae Adams happy. That's why, like, this is one of those things where everyone needs to be on the same page, right? And what I mean by that is, like, you know, your owner has to go to Josh McDaniels and be like, hey, we went for it last season. We brought you in here. We believe in you. This is going to be a 4 or 5 year plan. We can, you know, blow this thing up and rebuild. You're not going to be out of a job in 18 months, right? Those are the tough conversations you have to have, and if you have them, and you're willing to partake in those conversations, then you can all get on the same page.
Yeah.
But the problem is Josh McDaniels isn't going to want to do something like that because he hasn't been given those assurances.
Well, that's the hard part. You're obviously caught between a rock and a hard place, and without that vote of confidence and knowing exactly how things are going to work, that you're able to fail before you succeed, you're probably not going to want to take that leap of faith. So we'll keep tabs on the Raiders. Their win total sits at 7.5, and to your point, the schedule doesn't exactly appear to do them any favors on the surface right now. A team where optimism reigns supreme hails from the NFC North, and I have to deal with this fan base on a day-in, day-out basis, up close and personal, because Payne, the offseason they've had, it's Super Bowl or bust for the former monsters of the Midway, the Chicago Bears. They trade out of the number 1 spot, showing a commitment to Justin Fields as their starting quarterback. They land DJ Moore, who both you and I love, as a true number 1 receiver for Fields in the offense. Add him to a receiving room of Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney, Equanimous St. Brown, and all the guys they have on the roster at least shows that they have what should be a group capable of making plays. From a free agent signing standpoint, you bring in Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards to replace Roquan Smith after he was dealt to the Ravens. Matt Eberflus has a love affair for the linebacker position, knowing that's what he played in college. That's where he coached to get his start in the NFL. DeMarcus Walker comes over from the Tennessee Titans. But when I look at this Bears offseason so far, I know they drafted 1 offensive lineman when they traded down to get Darnell Wright, but I felt that should have been a place of emphasis. And you get Darnell Wright, you get Nate Davis. I didn't think they had to go out there and solidify their linebacking core first and foremost. Build a wall, build a fortress around the guy that you believe is going to take you to the promised land in Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, he really doesn't allow the offensive line to block long enough. He's usually one read and take it off. But, joke. I'm riling up Bears fans.
Well, that's not hard,
already.
So continue to go. If you want to continue to rile up Bear fans, you make my job a hell of a lot easier for me, so get after it.
You know, the old Bears GM Ryan Pace was god-awful. And now you have Ryan Poles in there, who I'm somewhat familiar with. He's, you know, was under Brett Veach in Kansas City. He has a pulse, right? There's no doubt Poles has been better in his short time running things for the Bears. Pulled off the great trade you referenced at the top with the Panthers and acquired a ton of capital, and likely the best player in the deal too with DJ Moore. Was shrewd, picking up an extra 4th rounder, moving back 1 spot with the Eagles so Philly could go out and get Jalen Carter. Went out and signed a good run blocking guard, Nate Davis, who you mentioned appears to have made some strides as a pass protector last season. So there's a lot of good. There's certain players I just don't love, and I think you hit on it, right? $72 million on Tremaine Edmonds, $50 million of it guaranteed. You know, he was below replacement level linebacker in 4 or 5 seasons. His best season came in a contract year. Big surprise, right?
Funny
and
how
then,
that seems to work.
You know, how much more can you get out of a defensive player when you approach player evaluation as a 2-step thinker, right? And realize Sean McDermott is an elite defensive mind. McDermott likely squeezed all the juice out of Tremaine Edmonds. That is what you're going to get in a best-case scenario. It's not like you signed an under-the-radar linebacker who's playing for a bad defense and an offensive-minded head coach, right? So that's kind of how I always think about things when you're starting to acquire some players like that. And I like going the route of signing TJ Edwards. That makes more sense to me at a devalued position, right? $19 million deal, of which only 40% of it's guaranteed. He just doesn't have the tools, right? He doesn't have the athletic traits. It's why he went undrafted in 2019. But you watch TJ Edwards, he wins with smarts, positioning, knowing where to be, has good field. In 4 seasons, Edwards never not graded above replacement level. And every single season, the Eagles, you would see, put more snaps on his plate. He continued to improve all of those years, right? You just kind of look at the snap count. Went from 492 to 710 to nearly 1,200 a year ago, and that was his best season. That's how I would approach spending money on linebackers in the NFL. That and, you know, the middle rounds of the draft. I did like some of the other things they did, though, right? I mean, the draft was, yeah, Darnell Wright, we can debate that till we're blue in the face. It was obviously a position of need. Tackle was a glaring hole. You get him at pick 10. Was he overdrafted? Sure. And you look at Wright, he just earned a ton of money, basically, handling Will Anderson Jr. the game we were at there, Todd. But he was basically a one-year wonder at Tennessee. They kicked him to right tackle, and he had a really nice season, not a dominant one. And he was coming off 3 subpar seasons prior to that. I haven't really heard anyone that really watches film say they love Tyreek Stevenson, the Bears' second-round corner who Poles moved up to get. Freak talent-wise, super athletic. But again, nobody I heard say anything positive about him from the guys that I trust watching film. Didn't hear much positive about Stevenson from my guys at Miami. So we'll see. Just both felt like reaches there, even though they were positions of need. Obviously, still need more time with the Bears this offseason. There's lots of hype. Always difficult to kind of... I know we were in a group text message that exchanged a few texts yesterday. It's one of the toughest things, I think, for any sports bettor is gauging improvement in a shit division and conference versus hype and market inflation. Chicago is clearly better than they were last year. They're clearly improved. They are clearly in a division and conference that is going to have a couple surprises. Why not be the Bears, right? But the hype that's coming out of there is difficult. So need to dive a little bit deeper, and obviously, our previews will come in August, and we'll have a little bit of a better feel for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I don't think they're the only difficult team to try and assess within that division. There's another group a little bit further north in the Eastern time zone, though. I don't think a lot of us know what we're going to get, given the way they're being priced in the market right now. But we'll know right out of the gates as they take part, in the season opener at Arrowhead against the defending Super Bowl champion. A couple other player moves that I think we can hit on rather quickly for some of them. Just wanted to get your initial take. Orlando Brown switches contenders, goes from Kansas City to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals signed Brown on a 4-year, $64 million deal. Were you at all surprised the Bengals made this kind of commitment to Brown? We know the offensive line has been a focus for them. They went out and addressed their position of need going into last offseason, and they obviously followed up with another big signing to provide building blocks in front of Joe Burrow.
Before I answer, I'm going to, now that you're married, you're going to get used to this a lot. I'm going to answer the question with a question. If you had to name the 3 or 4 teams that have the most pressure to win a Super Bowl this year, who are they?
I think the Bengals are actually number 1 or 1A, honestly, knowing the kind of commitment they're going to have to make to Joe Burrow from a contract standpoint.
So for me, it's the Bills, the Bengals, the Chargers 3, and Kyle Shanahan.
We ever put the Cowboys in that mix? I feel like they have pressure every year, but it's just unrealistic.
I just don't even consider. I don't consider them a player. So you look at the Bills, the Bengals, and the Chargers, and then kind of exclude Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers for a minute. Big money is coming due on the first 3, right? The Bills have to be paid. Guys want new deals. Loading the roster at every position isn't going to be an option anymore, and you can tell how the Orlando Brown contract was structured. The Bengals are all in. 34 of the $64 million comes year 1. It may say 4 years on Brown's contract, but it's really a 2-year deal. If the Bengals want to walk and need cap relief come 2025 so they can re-sign their horses, he's gone. And that's kind of how they wanted it, right? Even Orlando Brown's reps are basically like, this is a 2-year deal. We're going to take as much money as we can. If we get to 4, awesome. If not, we're going to have a boatload of money and we're going to be able to hit the market still in his prime for another contract, Here's the problem. Orlando Brown will only play left tackle. And the hope was Jonah Williams, coming off his worst season in the league, played at a replacement level last year, would be willing to kick to right tackle. Unfortunately, if you've been following the situation, Jonah and his reps aren't happy about that a year before he wants to get paid. And so Jonah wants out, and my understanding is the Bengals are willing to oblige and engage in trade talks. If that happens, Cincinnati has to sign somebody, because La'el Collins' injury was ugly, way worse than people thought. It wasn't just an ACL tear. He tore the PCL, the MCL, all 3. I'm not sure you can have a Super Bowl contender or Super Bowl aspirations with Hakeem Adeniji as your starting tackle in this league.
It makes things an uphill battle. There is no doubt about it. And it'll be interesting to watch this Jonah Williams situation unfold. The Bengals obviously have to make sure that there's a logical replacement they can go out there and bring in on the market. But yeah, to your point about La'el Collins, it doesn't appear that the Bengals are counting on him being a relevant factor early in the season. And even if he does come back healthy, how long will it take him to regain form? For a player that you highlighted last year when he got hurt, a lot of the talking heads thought it was a lot more disastrous injury, and you kind of went, hey, no, pump the brakes. He's barely playing at above a replacement level anyways.
Yeah, it was not the signing they envisioned. Let's just put it that way. And that was the unfortunate part to the Bengals, right? Because Jonah Williams had really had 2 solid seasons being drafted out of college, and then you're going to bring in La'el Collins. You're like, hey, we got our tackle situation fortified here. You added some pieces on the interior of the line. Maybe you can get Jackson Carman kicked to guard, which is what they thought when they drafted him out of Clemson. And our offensive line is going to be set. Suddenly, Jonah Williams regresses. La'el Collins regresses. The interior of the line didn't perform at the level of pay, and suddenly Joe Burrow just didn't have the wall of China in front of him like we expected going into last season.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, you talk about a couple of those teams, there's no doubt it's Super Bowl or bust for a lot of them when it comes time to pay the piper and get these young quarterbacks those life-changing deals. I mentioned the Cowboys a little bit earlier. Brandin Cooks comes over via trade from the Houston Texans. He was dealt to the Cowboys for a 5th in 2023 and a 6th-round pick in 2024. Last season, despite the carousel at quarterback, he caught 57 passes, a shade under 700 yards, and 3 scores in 13 games. He'll join up with CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and some other depth pieces as they try and bolster the receiving core for Dak Prescott. Obviously, that removed them from the OBJ sweepstakes at the time and was a trade that had been discussed last season before it finally came to fruition. More importantly, from a caps impact standpoint, relatively franchise-friendly in that regard. And it seems like Brandin Cooks Payne has the right mentality. I just wonder, what does Brandin Cooks have left in the tank? He's clearly not a number 1, but he won't be asked to fill that role opposite CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a make-or-break year for Mike McCarthy, and he's taken over play-calling duties, and he wanted another receiver, so in comes Brandin Cooks. I like Brandin Cooks if you understand what he is. The slander has been ridiculous. There hasn't been a guy that I can remember that's been cast off, traded away with this type of production multiple times now. I think Cook's the fine number 2. You can move him around some, versatile enough to be a factor in the wide receiver screen game. If you look at his contested catch rate, that's improved in recent years for a guy his size. CeeDee Lamb is looking for a new deal, so a big prove-it year for him. Show the world that you can be a top-end number 1 receiver. I don't get the vibe he's that elite number 1. So, your hope is that the combination of those two, Cooks and Lamb, kind of get you over the top. You hope Gallup can return to his 2019 form. They really need a 4th guy to emerge. That's a legitimate deep threat, right? That's the one element they're missing here. Turpin's shown some special teams value. Maybe he can take a top off of defense, right? He's got 4.3 speed. Tolbert runs 4.4. One of those guys needs to mature enough to fill that late season T.Y. Hilton role. But there was a need for Brandin Cooks. I was looking at this morning, and it's because I was just remembering back to the 49ers game in the playoffs there, and you would see some of the all-22 stuff. You'd even hear some of the broadcasters talking about it while the game was going on. It's like, man, these receivers just aren't separating. 122 receivers last season had at least 45 targets. Of those 122, Dallas didn't have a single pass catcher in the top 50 of separation created. And so CeeDee Lamb needs to be better. Brandin Cooks should help. Gallup needs to be better. Need to find that deep threat of the 2 young guys. Dak has to be better. If not, Mike McCarthy's on the unemployment line, and he'll then have his reps leak to the media about the analytics classes he's taking next offseason when he's unemployed again.
Hey, it's just going to be tough for the Cowboys. I don't know if they can go out and lure Sean Payton away from Denver. They let that opportunity slip right through their fingers. So if the Cowboys part ways with
I thought he would have been patient.
I thought so too, but maybe he felt he was going into a situation where Denver's going to give him the patience, knowing how big a dumpster fire it was with Nathaniel Hackett before and hoping that he can work with a veteran quarterback. And look, I mean, if you went in there and you're Sean Payton, not to go off on a tangent, and they underachieve again, you go, well, look, it's not on me, it's on Russell Wilson. You guys saw it the year before I got here. We have to go in a different direction, whereas suddenly you look like a savant if Russell Wilson regains some of the form that we saw in his latter years as a member of the Seattle Seahawks. But a team...
Let's say he does. Where are you going with the two quarterbacks in that division?
I mean...
Is that where you really want to live for the next decade?
Vying
against Justin Herbert and Patrick
You're vying
Mahomes?
for a wild card, or you're trying to make sure that your defense can do enough to give your offense a puncher's chance with, what we think is a decently underrated, to some extent, skill position group that they have there in Denver when they're all healthy. But
man, I think I would have waited a year if you can get Jerry or his Super Bowl before he passes. I mean, you kind of catapult your way into that.
Apparently, Sean Payton,
that coaching.
He didn't like he didn't like
weird.
getting squeezed in as the seventh man at the desk on NFL preview shows for Fox. So maybe that was what ended up prompting to make a move a little bit quicker. Javon Hargrave, Payne leaves Philadelphia for the West Coast to join the San Francisco 49ers. Steve Wilkes takes over for D'Amico Ryans as the Niners DC. When you look at Javon Hargrave, 23 sacks the last 3 years with the Eagles as an interior offensive lineman. In my opinion, he looks like a luxury piece up front with the likes of Drake Jackson, Eric Armstead, and Nick Bosa in the 4-3 defense. What do you think are realistic expectations for Hargrave in his new colors?
He's a great player. Now, you paid him like a great player, so now he needs to continue that production level. He generated a pressure or a run stop on 13% of snaps the last 2 seasons, 129 total pressures from the inside. So if Hargrave can bring that with him to San Francisco, it just makes Bosa's job that much easier. The 49ers are all in. They believe they were the better team than the Eagles, but played with 10 guys, and you hear people spouting off. Anyone from the 49ers locker room is basically spouting off about that. So now all of a sudden, you can add to your roster while subtracting from your main counterpart. It makes some sense. Again, Kyle Shanahan's one of, in my mind, the top 4 guys or top 4 teams that must win a Super Bowl this season. Like the pressure's on here.
When we talk about Super Bowl, there's obviously a defending champion, and you didn't think we were going to go through all the offseason storylines with at least touching on your Kansas City Chiefs over there. Offensive line, personnel.
Why do you're really playing this?
I do. I need a little bit of shtick around here.
I
need a little bit of a shtick.
You're really getting Bills and Bengals fans all riled up because they believe
that. That's the goal. That means they believe in a lot of the gospel that we share on the Bet the Board podcast. So if I can get them riled up, I am doing my job as a host, damn it. Kansas City
Dolphins fan over here, just spouting truthisms about the Chiefs for the last 3 years that no one wants to actually
It's a good
realize.
point. Nobody wanted to believe in, and we know the Super Bowl win against the Philadelphia Eagles still comes with an asterisk and will for the foreseeable future. The Chiefs' offensive line going to look a little bit different, though. We talked about Orlando Brown leaving Kansas City for Cincinnati, so it forces the Chiefs to go in a different direction. For solving some of their questions, it's Juwan Taylor and Donovan Smith. When you look at the $20 million a year they spent on Juwan Taylor with an expectation to play on the left side, very much TBD. Donovan Smith comes over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. When we look at these two players, very interesting in what they're able to do. Taylor was drafted by the Jaguars back in 2019. He's been working on his new position, expected to be on the left side. Donovan Smith, during his time in Tampa at 29 years old, 2 years removed from a dominant season in which he compiled, a top 10 number as far as Pro Football Focus was concerned from a pass blocking grade. When you look at Smith as well, among tackles to record at least 900 total snaps, back in 2001, his pass blocking grade was elite. These two pieces, the kind of building blocks you'd like to see around the franchise when it comes to keeping Patrick Mahomes healthy for the season.
You remember back to a conversation we had in last year's offseason about the Chiefs making an offer to Orlando Brown and me saying, boy, kind of glad he reneged on that?
That I do.
Okay. So that offer was for 6 years, $139 million, $30 million signing bonus, $95 million guaranteed the first 5 seasons. Orlando Brown declined. So it's not like Brett Veach didn't try. He also tried pulling a trade for the best pass blocking left tackle last season in Laremy Tunsil. Couldn't get it done. So yes, Kansas City overspent on Juwan Taylor. Orlando Brown, to me, is a more complete player than Taylor, far better run blocker. I think Juwaun is the equivalent as a pass protector, maybe even slightly better. And if you have a Chiefs offense that's first in pass rate over expectation, you can see why they might go with a little bit more of a nimble pass blocker. I love the Donovan Smith signing. He's only 29. To your point, had an elite 2021 season for the Buccaneers. Last year, Smith played through a dislocated elbow, a foot injury. Now you get him on a 1-year prove-it deal that won't exceed $9 million. And I think this actually allows Kansas City to play Juwan Taylor at right tackle. And in this instance, Juwan Taylor becomes a big upgrade over Andrew Wiley at right tackle. And if Donovan Smith in a prove-it year plays to his 2021 level, he becomes an upgrade over Orlando Brown as a pass protector at left tackle. And I think this buys Kansas City another year of getting Taylor some reps at left tackle in practice. Lucas Niang and Wanya Morris can continue developing. Wanya Morris has all the traits: height, wingspan, athleticism, just needs to develop a little bit, isn't completely strong enough to kind of be a starting tackle right now. So I think Veach did a good job kind of turning water into wine in free agency and in the draft, not getting a deal done with Brown or pulling off the Tunzel deal and ending up with these two tackles. Hopefully you get an extension done with Chris Jones so there's some salary cap relief and another piece or two can be added before the season starts. Maybe a receiver, maybe you go make that trade for DeAndre Hopkins with some cap space freed up a little bit. We'll see how this unfolds. But I think for what transpired, Veach did the best he could here. Do I love Juwan Taylor for $60 million guaranteed over 4 years? I don't. But, you had Orlando Brown scoff at a bigger deal than the one he took, and then you were this close to getting Laramie Tunzel, and the Texans, for whatever reason, decided that he was going to be an integral part of their offseason plans, and they wanted a left tackle to help protect a young quarterback that they were going to go get in the draft.
You know what? Listening to you talk about it makes a lot more sense than when you read some of the articles out there, because I was as stunned as anybody talking, when you read some of the stuff about Juwan Taylor working on, moving to the left side, and you go, I'm not sure this is exactly what the recipe you'd want right now, but if you're able to sign Taylor under the auspice of what you would pay a right tackle, you have Donovan Smith as the placeholder. Taylor has a chance to learn the position. Suddenly he can become one of the biggest discounts in the game. And the one thing I will say about Taylor, even if he's a little bit raw and may not have some of the measurables you're looking for, at least right now, in terms of full body of work, durability has been one of his strengths. And we talk about it all the time in the NFL. Being available is one of the most underrated aspects of being a contributor week in, week out. And when you look at Taylor's number, he started 66 straight games during his Jags career, and I think that has to be a very attractive proposition for Kansas City when you're talking about offensive line continuity.
Yeah, and he wasn't going to come cheap. I mean, listen,
but he ends up playing left tackle. It's
a position. It's a position of need. His agent's Drew Rosenhaus, so I mean, this wasn't going to come cheap. And once you strike out on Orlando Brown, once the Texans decide, hey, even though Laramie Tunzel might not be, the youngest left tackle right now, and this is going to be a 4-year rebuild for us, we still want him around. Once they made that internal decision, you had to gravitate to a different path. And I think, again, the Donovan Smith deal to me just makes a world of sense. I mean, if he can even come close to his 2021 performance where he's, much healthier, that could be the biggest signing of the offseason. It really could. And then all of a sudden, next offseason, he hits his year 30 window. Is someone really going to give him a 4 or 5 year deal? Big money? Probably not. So maybe, the idea of winning, you can get him on a team-friendly deal and you bring Donovan Smith again back next year. This just buys you time to figure out what the best approach is, and I thought Veach handled it pretty well.
Hey, look, there's no reason for us to doubt anything that the Kansas City Chiefs do, and until proven otherwise, I think you have to begin to buy into everything going on. And you talk about the offensive line signing. I know you were fond of a player they brought on the defensive side as well, but we'll get to him when we talk about the Chiefs during those August previews. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, as always, you can follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod, but you should also be following this man for all of your offseason injury updates. He'll be back with us again this season, and it's Deepak Chona at Sport MD Analysis. Deepak provides some of the injury updates around your favorite players and when you may see them back on the NFL field.
Are you injured or are you hurt? When injuries occur in the NFL, you need someone to call on.
If you're hurt, you can still play. If you're injured, you can't.
Let's check in with Dr. Deepak Chona, Stanford and Harvard trained orthopedic sports surgeon and founder of Sports Med Analytics, the industry leader in data-driven injury analysis.
So are you hurt or are you injured?
All right, well, thank you all for having me. The offseason injury news has been flowing, so let's dive right in. Starting with Kyler Murray. For me, it's going to be a hard pass on his 2023 season. Quarterback passing numbers don't drop, but running and scrambling both do for about 15 months post-injury. Plus, the timeline of return here is going to be pretty volatile. The average takes 10 months, but elite athletes recover faster, and Kyler is in the 90-plus percentile range for most explosive metrics. But young players with huge contracts tend to return slower, probably because the teams want to protect their long-term investment. We're estimating week 8 to 12 for Kyler's return, but the range here is going to be large. Then we have Brock Purdy. Now he's likely starting light throwing in June, getting up to full speed early September. That would put him ready close to week 1, but if we had to guess, they'd probably ramp him up to appear in the week 4 to 6 range. MLB pitchers are able to return to their pre-injury levels off of this surgery, and quarterbacks put less strain on this injured ligament than pitchers do. So therefore, we have every reason to expect a promising 2023 campaign from Purdy, assuming he's given opportunity. Now there is the one potential wild card here, and that's his ulnar nerve. It was irritated, and that occasionally takes a little longer to recover than the ligament itself. Now it most likely will be fine, but don't bank on it just yet. And then we have Matthew Stafford. He got shut down last year with a slew of injuries, an elbow, 2 concussions, plus a spinal cord contusion. Now that's a beast of a list, but individually, each one should heal well without surgery. So to start off 2023, expect Stafford to look like his old self. The injury rates for pocket-based quarterbacks are heavily tied to the strength of their offensive lines, so that's probably going to be the determining factor in Stafford's durability outlook for the year. And then a little bit of a similar situation, Tua Tagovailoa. Now he should start strong, but with him, the very relevant question is whether he'll last the whole season. Now this off-season jiu-jitsu training actually probably does work to decrease his risk to his head, which is huge because another concussion could be career-ending. The injuries he's had so far don't project to cause any real lingering performance hit, but as a smaller pocket-based quarterback, most likely Tua staying healthy will also be decided by the play of the O-line. And then we move to the running backs. Tony Pollard should pick up right where he left off despite ankle surgery. He should be fully cleared around June, and our data shows that running back numbers don't noticeably dip even in year 1 post-injury. There is a mild elevation in his re-injury risk this year, but overall no major concerns, and of course in Dallas, not a lot of competition from that backfield for touches. And then we have Breece Hall. Now probably our most frequently asked question this offseason. Breece Hall does have a solid chance to play week 1. Young running backs average about 10 months post-ACL, and that's right where Hall will be by September. Most running backs do see a short-term dip in their productivity when they first return, and that period usually ends around 18 months, but there is a lot of variability. From our database, we've learned that age, draft position, and pre-injury athletic metrics are each meaningful predictors of the severity and duration of the post-ACL decline. In Hall's case, he's young at age 21, really truly elite as an athlete with 95th percentile combine metrics, and he was drafted really high at 36th overall out of college. Together, this makes for as favorable an outcome as possible. We've seen top running backs bounce back quickly. Breece Hall does fit that analytics mold for the type of player that does it. And then Javonte Williams, a little less optimistic here. Javonte Williams probably not playing week 1. It is medically possible for sure, but the average takes 15 months. Dobbins took 13, and week 1 for Javonte would only be 11. Plus, you then have to factor in that young running backs averaged a 3 to 4 game period to ramp up their snap counts even once they return. And then for production, there tends to be a dip around 20 to 30% in the first year back. It does bounce back by year 2, so we do expect to see some glimpses in late 2023, but probably not sustained over the course of a season. And then 1 year further into the recovery from the same injury, J.K. Dobbins. This year, data does support high expectations for Dobbins. Expect the running back who averaged about 100 yards per game, 6.5 yards per carry in his last 5 games. Running back numbers, as we said for Javonte, do drop hard the first year back from multi-ligament knee surgery. Our algorithm here predicts about 19 months post-injury for J.K. Dobbins to return to his pre-injury levels. You factor that in with his strong finish to 2022, which was around months 18 and 19 post-injury, and there's a strong reason for optimism here. The main question to me isn't really health, more so opportunity. Then we have Rashad Penny, likely cleared well before camp, and data indicates no real performance dip and a relatively low re-injury risk. He did average 6 yards per carry pre-injury in 2022, and that Eagles O-line is of course stacked. Add in that defensive have to face the threat of Jalen Hurts running, and overall Penny makes for a strong comeback candidate this year. Then we have Michael Thomas. Now Thomas had surgery in November for a toe dislocation that he sustained 2 months prior to that. The good news here is that a slow return to football would take about 6 months, and that would get him cleared no later than June. The bad news is that his explosiveness may lag behind a little more than normal because of those extra 2 months where he wasn't really able to train. However, by mid-season, we would expect to see the full-strength version of Thomas. And do remember, he did show brief glimpses of that elite wide receiver 1 level play last year, so it is within the reasonable range of outcomes. But can he stay healthy? Believe it or not, there's actually not specific points in his injury history that predict higher durability risk, but in general, turning 30 tends to be associated with more frequent minor injuries in a season, and of course Thomas's health has been on and off to say the least. We'd take a late flyer on Thomas, but count on very, very little in terms of mid and late season availability. And then we have Odell Beckham Jr., another frequently asked question this offseason. Even after 2 ACLs, OBJ can still be a stud, and the data does support it. Return to football averages about 13 months, and he's well past that point and has surely been fully cleared by now. The production dip off 2 ACLs is real, but the data suggests it recovers around 18 months, and OBJ will be 19 by week 1. There are minimal short-term durability concerns and major long-term ones, and we're talking 2 to 3 or more years from now. And also keep in mind that any re-injury to that knee could be a career ender. And then we have Kyle Pitts, who off of MCL surgery is actually a really strong bet. He should be cleared well before camp. The production hit from these recovers around month 6 post-injury, and week 1 will be well past that, so we would expect him to be around 100%. There's pretty minimal durability concern here, and DeAndre Hopkins looked great when he came back from this last year, averaging 97 yards per game in 5 games with Kyler Murray. So we are very optimistic overall on Kyle Pitts. And then we have Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, he is a good late season bet, and late season specifically is what I want to emphasize here. The average timeline takes about 10 months, which for him would be right around week 1. So he has a solid chance to play, but definitely not guaranteed. Wide receiver stats tend to dip the first year back, but elite athleticism does work in Wan'Dale Robinson's favor. So expect the bounce back to 100% right near the end of 2023 and a progressive ramp up that may be a little bit hit or miss on the way there. And that's all we have for today. So until next time, signing off.
Great stuff as always, Payne from Deepak, who breaks it all down, talking about Kyler Murray, an Arizona Cardinal fan. Sit and try and figure out, if for a team that had their win total at 9.5 a season ago, if they can just get to 5 wins this year, as they'll go through a little bit of a rebuild on their own. And when we talk about rebuilds, it's obviously important to get your take on the draft. And I know we don't have to do a deep dive here by any stretch of the imagination. We're not looking for draft grades on all 32 teams. So if there was a team that stood out to you in a positive manner, in terms of a draft that you liked overall, who would you give your A grade to?
I think there's a couple ways to assess the draft, right? Did we get value relative to the board, right? And from an outsider's perspective, everyone's not in the trenches of these war rooms. Did your favorite team or did Team A get value relative to consensus mocks? And the other way to do this is if there were a team that's a couple pieces away, did you get some day one impact contributors? So I think, there's a couple teams that fit this bill. I know a couple of your buddies, this is their favorite team. So I was surprised, but just kind of looking through some things. I liked what the Steelers have done basically all offseason. I also thought their draft was solid. You go up, get a day one starter at tackle with Broderick Jones, position of need. At one point, he was thought to be the top tackle in this draft. Has to get some things figured out with his technique. His head dips like he's a horse coming down the stretch of the Kentucky
Derby. Got to get your nose across the line. You got to get your nose across the line.
Tough to block when you can't quite see what's in front of you. So long story short is I think they'll get that figured out, and he could potentially be the best tackle in this draft. Then you go out and you get Pittsburgh royalty and Joey Porter Jr. There's a lot of mock drafts like a week out that had Porter going to Pittsburgh in the first round. Keanu Benton was a guy that was getting a lot of buzz for hitting the back end of round one leading up to the draft. Just a big athletic guy. Darnell Washington was supposed to be a round 2 pick at worst. Some Phil guys believe he's the most complete tight end in this draft, and the Steelers get him in the back end of round 3, and I like Nick Herbert, just kind of a tweener. So he drops a little bit. Corey Trice, physical corner in round 7. I like what the Colts did. And, Chris Ballard is a guy that I think we were all very high on initially when he got that Colts job, and he was working with some smart, sophisticated people and kind of push some of those guys to the wayside the last 18 to 24 months, but I think he kind of found his way here. And I loved what Ballard and the Colts accomplished, right? It was a top 3 draft from a value points perspective. Effectively, what was every player's draft expectation range versus where Indianapolis picked them. There was great value. But I think the philosophy change was huge here. There was an organizational shift, right? It just feels like Ballard finally surrendered. If you think about the Colts the last couple of years, right? It's a recycling of old quarterbacks that were sent packing by their previous employer. Ballard rips the Band-Aid off, right? Drafts Anthony Richardson, who's the highest upside quarterback in this draft by a long mile. And once Shane Steichen improves, Anthony Richardson says, that's my guy. You let him start the Colts tenure with this quarterback, knowing that Steichen was responsible for the Eagles' offensive shift. Like, if you look at the Eagles initially, then all of a sudden Steichen takes over. There was this massive surge there, and then you see Jalen Hurts' growth and, awesome stuff there. So if he says, hey, I can do this with Anthony Richardson, you give him that chance because you saw what he did with Jalen Hurts. Nobody really thought Jalen Hurts was going to be that guy. Then you look at the entire body of work. 10 of 12 picks for the Colts were premium positions, right? Quarterback, receiver, secondary, edge rusher, offensive tackle. We pointed this out years ago, and then others started to run with it. But Ballard was building his team around non-premium positions and paying large sums to do so, right? Linebacker, interior defensive line, interior row line. Not how you build the team for long-term success. So I was really impressed with how Ballard and the Colts completely changed their philosophy. Then I saw your outline here, and I completely agreed. There's 2 drafts that I like that came from contenders, the Bills and the Bengals. And I think going back to the top, right, did you find some contributors, or do you at least have a clear plan that we can identify? And I thought the Bills got 2 day one contributors. It's not going to be at all shocking if Dalton Kincaid ends up being, the Bills' second or third favorite target of Josh Allen. A position of need was Osiris Torrance at pick 28 in round 2. He was being mocked 10 days before the draft, the back end of round 1. I think Torrance has a chance to start day 1, be a plus run blocker. Dorian Williams, athletic freak at linebacker, 4.4 speed, totally rangy, can go sideline to sideline, finish top 5 in athleticism at the combine for backers. He'll be that Tremaine Edmonds replacement. Cincinnati's draft, I don't know if it has as many day 1 contributors, but they executed a plan, right? Knowing you're going to have to re-sign Burrow, Chase, Higgins, there are going to be some casualties, and one of the rumored casualties is going to be Trey Hendrickson. So you look, since he goes and finds his replacement with Myles Murphy, secondary, a premium position. They addressed that in rounds 2 and 3 with DJ Turner and Jordan Battle. Tyler Boyd, unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. Unless it's a really team-friendly deal, he's likely gone. So Charlie Jones is the pick in round 4. Chase Brown in round 5, right? Running back, a position of need. If I think if Brown looks good in camp,
he could be their starter.
Now maybe we go away from Joe Mixon and his $13+ million cap hit. We'll see. But Cincinnati had a clear plan and thought process. You could see it. They accomplished it. So I liked those drafts and liked them for completely different perspectives, right? Were there better drafts than Cincinnati and Buffalo's? Yes, but for what they were attempting to achieve right now, they made a lot of sense.
I think it's always tougher when you assess drafts for teams that are already contenders that are, oftentimes drafting from a position of luxury. When you go through and you read a lot of the folks in and around the NFL, the talking heads, they obviously like to give A grades to teams that are drafting quarterbacks because you feel that's a position that has the highest upside. Look, the Bills and Bengals are teams that don't need to do that, so they're not going to have some of those guys that you go, wow, this is a player that's going to step right in and completely revolutionize the franchise. But if you can continue to fortify some positions of concern and or provide depth, I think it's a step in the right direction. On the flip side for me, Payne, maybe you can make sense of it. I'm not sure what the Dallas Cowboys were doing with their draft, and quite frankly, for as positive as we've been about a lot of things that John Lynch and the 49ers do, I'm not sure the 49ers did anything to really bolster their roster during the draft.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going on in San Francisco. They're, I guess, in their minds, a piece or two away.
Was that piece Jake Moody in the third round?
I
mean, you need to get a kicker that high. I love special teams guys more than anybody else, but good Lord.
He's got a big leg, right? And their prior kicker is more about accuracy and isn't able to kick the ball, far away. And I don't know. I like Kyle Shanahan. I think he's really good. He's just an offensive brainiac. And he's kind of keeping things afloat because they have not drafted overly well. You get Bosa, obviously, right? But there was opportunities just to load this roster with good draft picks, and you give up the farm for Trey, and done. They just don't seem to have any interest in Trey Lance. So it's you gave up the house for him, and it's what did you come out of it with? Didn't love their draft this year either. The other team you mentioned, Dallas, Maze Smith is interesting, right? I mean, he's a guy that's continuing to ascend. He's shown some ability to get after the passer from the interior a little bit better the last couple of years, so you're hoping you can improve that a little bit, and was the elite run stuffer in this draft. I know Kansas City was a position of need. They wanted a big body to pair next to Chris Jones, and supposedly they were trying to move up into the draft. No one was willing to deal with Kansas City and help them improve because you think about all the teams that were in that window of pick 22 to 30, right? It's the Eagles in front of them, it's the Bills in front of them, it's Cincinnati in front of them, it's the Chargers in front of them. So they didn't have any suitors, but the word was the Chiefs were making a move to go get Maze Smith. So, I don't necessarily hate that pick. Certainly better than taking Zeke Elliott in the top 5. But yeah, I didn't love a ton of their draft. But
well, you mentioned a running back, and may as well hit on a couple of players that went in the first round. A lot of our listeners who watch college football know the impact these guys made at the college level. So I'll rattle them off. Bijan Robinson goes number 8 to the Atlanta Falcons. Jahmyr Gibbs goes at number 12 to the Detroit Lions. A player like Will McDonald goes 15th overall to the Jets, which felt like the Jets didn't really have a backup plan once Gibbs came off the board before they were ready to take him. And then Will Levis at the top of the second round. Any of those players you feel drafted properly, overdrafted, underdrafted for some of the household names that we've grown accustomed to watching on Saturdays?
Atlanta is interesting. I get the selection because he's one of the best players in the draft, but they were the most efficient running team last year. So you have a ton of other holes. What's the goal here with drafting running back at 8? Right? I mean, you can go from number 1 to number 1, I guess, right? So from that perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And when you think about the slotting of payments, suddenly when you're paying a running back what's guaranteed at pick 8, he needs to come in and be a top 10 running back immediately, day one. So, if you get the 10th best production out of him, you're paying what he's equivalent to. Jahmyr Gibbs is interesting because, listen, I like Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, better than everyone. And you can go back
you did last year. You thought that was one of the biggest additions
it wasn't
that
even
Bama
last
made
year.
in the transfer portal, talking about what you'd seen on tape during his time at Georgia Tech.
it wasn't even that. The reports I was getting out the year before, because he was an early transfer, he could practice with Alabama when they were making their title run the year before, and like I was hearing he was the best player on the field, and this was a national championship contender Alabama team the year prior to last. And he's going to provide things in the pass game. And so you're not completely evaluating him as a running back who's going to touch the ball 22 times a game and run his head into a brick wall in the middle of the line of scrimmage and not have, a ton of longevity. I think if Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy you're giving the ball to as a running back, 6, 7, 8 times a game, you're targeting him in the pass game because we know Goff likes to dump it off, 6, 7, 8 times a game. I think that's Jahmyr Gibbs' best role, and when you factor his value in as a receiver, the value's a little bit enhanced. But again, this was a guy who 10 days prior to the draft, I was hearing the Miami Dolphins really wanted him at pick 51. And then 3 days before the draft starts, you're like, Jahmyr Gibbs could slide into the back end of the first round, and here he goes to the Lions. So, do you love spending that type of draft capital there? No. But I like the player. Will McDonald's interesting. You mentioned the Jets not having a backup plan. They were looking to take Broderick, and then Pittsburgh swiftly moved in front of them and nabbed him. And then their second choice in Jahmyr Gibbs, you mentioned, was also taken. So Will McDonald, the third choice. Will McDonald was being mocked at the back end of round 1, was never going to get past Kansas City. I think the interesting part about Will McDonald is you don't really want to question some of the edge rushers that realm and that coaching staff has taken, right? Like, I just think they seem to hit pretty well on defensive ends when you go back to his time in San Francisco. Will McDonald doesn't have great tape, but he's an athletic freak. And when you think about why McDonald doesn't have great tape, it's because he was asked to do things at Iowa State that aren't in his skill set. He is a true speed edge rusher, right? He's a wide 9 guy. That's not what Iowa State was asking him to do. And so I think if you can kind of mentally say, hey, we'll just take the best of Will McDonald and that's all we're going to put on his plate year 1, I don't mind this. It's obviously a premium position. So, are you selecting him in the middle of round 1? Are you selecting him, from 25 to 31, we're splitting hairs there. And if they see him in a certain role and say, hey, in terms of speed edge rushers, this was actually our favorite guy, you can't fault them there. Will Levis, different story. I mean, we've talked about Will Levis over the years, just simply not as high in him as the rest of the market. And then, when Reddit, Frankie987431 decided to, say that Will Levis was going to be the second pick, the entire world decided to run with that. And I think his value was wildly overinflated. He was never going to go there. Now, should he have gone round 1? My information said the Titans were desperately trying to get back into round 1, but could not find a suitor to take Will Levis. So it was foregone that they were going to take him early in round 2. Again, similar to what I mentioned there with the Kansas City Chiefs not being able to find a suitor. Again, you think about all those teams, right? It's teams that are in win now, go get that extra piece or two that can contribute day 1. The Eagles, Chargers, Bills, Bengals weren't willing to move back and not take a surefire, in their minds, day 1 contributor. And so the Titans weren't able to move back into the first round and take Will Levis. They got him there at the top of round 2. Save some money, but don't get that 5th year.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I mean, look, we can sit here and dole out draft grades and say we love a class, we dislike a class. Teams that have a proven track record are always going to get the benefit of the doubt. Other teams are going to need these guys to go out there and produce, and they're not going to necessarily see the fruit of their labor for 3 to 5 years down the road and figure out exactly what they have from the draft class. One last thing that I think is worth touching on before we close up shop on the offseason podcast here would be the schedule release that happened on Thursday. And when you begin to look at schedules, we knew the list of opponents that all 32 teams were going to play. So that doesn't come as a surprise. It's where they play those opponents. It's how the home and road games get set up. It's which teams will have to travel abroad and some of the unique nuances that give us an edge as professional bettors to try and be able to extract a little bit of value and take advantage of the opportunity that's there. From an AFC, NFC standpoint, we know that the AFC has the balance of power. The NFC appears to be much more wide open with a lot fewer contenders there. As far as individual schedules that you wanted to highlight, were there certain things that stood out for you with a team that looks to be with a very favorable schedule. I know we touched on the Saints earlier, or a team on the flip side that looks like, oh, holy hell, this team's got its work cut out for them based on the way schedule makers have stacked up their opponents.
I appreciate you starting this with the very first sentence, in that we knew exactly who these teams were going to be playing. And so it made schedule release day a little funny to me, because everyone's like, oh, this leaked, oh, that leaked. And we're like reporting leaked schedules of like the first 4 games. And it's like, we already knew who these teams are playing. Can we all just wait till 8 o'clock? Or are we just trying to create content for the sake of content?
That's exactly what it was. It's the latter, as always.
Reporting unofficial schedules from Reddit from, singular teams the first 7 weeks. I thought the Giants got a little bit of a raw deal. You did mention that we already touched on the Saints. Very easy schedule to start the season. Very easy schedule overall. Not shocking. The Jets start. I know we mentioned them a little bit earlier. They have a very, very tough first 6 weeks, but not shocking. Something that we've been pounding the table on the last 24 months, and that the AFC is an absolute gauntlet. And sure enough, 7 of the 8 toughest schedules in the entire league are AFC teams this season.
Good luck.
So it's an absolute gauntlet. I know we're going to touch on this a little bit more when we get into the season previews in August. I just, we're touching on things that have already been put out there. But yes, when teams are playing, we find out travel situations, we find out locations of games, we find out which weeks those teams are going to play each other. That was, the one difference to what we already knew. And maybe this is a good lead-in. I don't think you expected it, and I was praying to hold it, but I think we have a best bet that we should give out that plays into a little bit of this that I don't think we can wait on. Yeah, I don't think we can wait on.
Best bet on today's show. You definitely threw me for a curveball.
So, we were holding this in the holster, and maybe mark this down for our producer's sake of what time this is, because we didn't really. We're just going to go right into it and then get out of Dodge. I know you got some things to do here, but I was hoping to hold this, and there was a better price 24 hours ago prior to schedule release. Again, we already knew who the teams were playing, but I wanted to wait on this one specific thing to strengthen our position, and that's when the Rams were playing the Cardinals. Because it looks like Kyler Murray could miss the first few weeks of the regular season. I didn't want 2 early Cardinal games on the Rams schedule. It's now confirmed those games will be week 6 and 12. Kyler should be back for both of those. When I look at the Rams, aside from the roster being extremely poor and thin because the route they chose to go chase a Super Bowl, the NFC gets the extra road game this season. The Rams face a league-high 4 teams off the bye, so extra rest and prep for 4 opponents. There's 3 different sets of back-to-back road games for the Rams, and even though the Rams are playing in the NFC, they play a schedule above average in difficulty. You look at the first 6 weeks, it's a schedule that borders on being one of the 10 most difficult, and I think that's important. The Rams aren't going anywhere. This is a rebuild. And when you look at snap-weighted age rankings, the Rams had the 3rd oldest roster prior to the draft when they selected 14 guys. None of those 14 were in the first 35 picks. And you look at a few of the Rams' early picks, guard, interior, run stopper, backup quarterback of the future, right? Do the Rams start dealing guys after a slow start to expedite the rebuild? Do we know if Aaron Donald suddenly might want to retire again? Something he's contemplated a lot over the last 24 months.
He says he's healthier than he's ever been right now. He's saying the right things until he's got to go out there and hit someone.
What I'm saying is neither of those instances are certainties, right? That they're going to just dump everyone, that Aaron Donald might, retire in the middle of the season. But you have to factor some of it into your number just a little bit. So best bet Rams under 7.5 minus 155. Those are at the 2 places of which own 2/3 of market share. Some lower numbers got hit at other places, right? Our former offshore sponsor that got hit there yesterday. Again, I was waiting to hold this one until August. It's not going to happen. So let's go on this now. Grab under 7.5 minus 55. Again, both at the 2 highly promoted shops. And And then we'll go from there.
I mean, sometimes you wake up on a Friday morning feeling a bit froggy, and these are the kind of things that come down the pike that you don't expect. So a best bet out of nowhere as far as the offseason podcast is concerned. Was there anything else you did want to touch on schedule-related in terms of any teams, just small nuggets or nuances? Obviously, we'll have plenty of time to cover this in August when we look at these teams through a much narrower lens and we do a preview for each division. But I wasn't sure if there was anything you wanted to highlight before we close up shop here this fine Friday in May.
I'm good on my end, unless you have something pressing. Get it off your chest.
I really don't have anything pressing. I guess, the last thing I have to ask you, are there any shows that you recommend for our listeners that they need to make sure that they shoehorn in over the next, I don't know, what do we have, 118 days until the NFL season kicks off, a little bit less for college football? I mean, people are looking for ways to pass the time during the summer, and you have become the show whisperer around these fine parts.
I'm a little foggy this morning. I've been sleeping like crap since I've been back from Vegas. Had a couple late nights, and my body clock isn't fully adjusted yet. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's any shows that I've been watching. I really don't have a ton of time for shows. Okay. Kiefer Sutherland's new show, Rabbit Hole.
I've gone through a couple episodes there. I like what I've seen so far. Have you finished the whole season already?
Yes. I don't believe so. All right. I want to say maybe episode 6, 7 in there. Obviously watching Succession. You haven't started the new season yet. I have started the
new season. I haven't wanted to text you. I think I'm through 3 episodes, so we've seen a plot shift, of course. Not going to play spoiler here. But yes, I'm starting to catch up a little bit. I know I have some ways to go. And I've been working through Breaking Bad. I think we just finished season 2, since that's a collaborative effort on the home front around these parts.
The boy is becoming a man. Finally dipping his toes into Breaking Bad waters. Let me ask you this, and then we'll wrap this up. Succession, I said season 3 kind of fell off aside from the finale. And what I posed to you was, I know you haven't started season 4 yet, but I think so far every single episode in season 4 has been better than any episode in season 3, excluding the finale. Is that, in your mind, a true statement? I thought
episode 1 of this season was a little bit off. It's starting to pick up steam right now, and I kind of want to reserve judgment. Only because...
Didn't like episode 1.
Here's the thing. You and I come at this very differently. I mean, you love to take shots. I like the slow build, the episodes where you don't have anything that really happens. So I have no problem when you eventually ramp up to try and elaborate on some of those storylines. So we'll see exactly how things progress. But the one...
You thought show 1 was episode 1 of season 4 was too slow for you.
I thought it was starting to build. I didn't think it was, came out with this blockbuster. The one thing I will tell you, though, is that the first couple episodes of season 4 of Succession, better dialogue than the movie that we saw in Sisu, that I do not recommend for people unless they're looking to kill about 2 hours for I don't even know what I would call that movie, by the way.
I was looking so forward to that movie, and then all of a sudden it got pushed up. There wasn't a ton of marketing for it. It was effectively marketed as Mad Max meets John Wick. And boy, oh boy. Maybe wait for that one to leave the theaters if you get bored and watch it on your favorite streaming
Silence
platform.
Speaks volumes. The one thing I will say, and now it all makes sense for me, by the way, in terms of why you selected this Friday for our off-season podcast, it's because the movie Air that we both loved about Michael Jordan and everything that went on with Nike ends up on Prime Video today. So if you haven't seen that, that is must-see appointment viewing to try and take advantage of this weekend. And for all the guys out there that are watching, worried that their wives or girlfriends may not want to watch with them, I think they'll fully enjoy it as well, even if they don't know all the storylines. The one thing, Payne, that you'll appreciate here, Nick didn't understand all of the details around the Nike situation because there's obviously an age gap there. So that part was interesting as we kind of went back and forth, and she had some questions there. But outstanding job from Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and everybody else that contributed. So if you haven't seen that, that would probably be my number one recommendation going into the weekend.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've already seen it 3 times. I think if you're expecting a Michael Jordan movie, it's not that. It's very much a Nike movie. It's very much a Sonny Vaccaro movie, and the acting was absolutely fantastic, extremely well done.
For sure. One last thing, by the way, before we officially close up shop. For all of you, our loyal listeners who have been waiting for football to come back, look, there are other ways to try and get involved in the sports betting market and the sports memorabilia space, and Bet the Board is trying to cover all of those aspects for you. So if you haven't already done so, encourage you guys and girls out there to check out Cardboard Chat. Payne does an outstanding job with Jesse Craig of PWCC Marketplace talking about the changing face of sports trading cards and how lucrative and valuable that market can be as you look to try and round out your investment portfolio. And for those folks looking to try and find wagering with an edge during the summer months to build those football bankrolls, listen to Stay Green. Chris Wormy and I go through each and every NASCAR race during the Cup season, trying to identify the best pre-week opportunities that are there. And unlike some of the other podcasts we do, we'll offer up a best bet on Sunday when we have a lot more information at our disposal. If you've been betting those things blindly, you'd have quite the ROI to start the season, and we see no change in sight. So I want to encourage all of you guys to do that. For Payne Insider, I'm Todd Furman. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow Bet the Board and sign up for the Bet the Board podcast newsletter with a Rams regular season wins ticket under the total. We'll see you at the window.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.